This video is predicting that the Denver Broncos will beat the Seattle Seahawks in this year's NFL Super Bowl on February 8th, 2026. This video is being recorded prior to the semifinals, the AFC and NFC Championship games. The date that this video is posted on the social media platform you are watching it on proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, this introduction of this video here is the same as the other video. If you've already watched the other video, you could skip ahead just a few minutes or something. I think it's about 9 minutes or so. But, watch it again if you have already. Anyway, after this introduction, we'll get into new information for how it is known ahead of time that the Broncos will beat the Seattle Seahawks in this year's Super Bowl. All right, welcome. This video is predicting that the Denver Broncos will beat the Seattle Seahawks in the 2026 Super Bowl. This prediction, this video, is being produced prior to the AFC and NFC Championship games. For those that don't know football, it means that this video is being produced prior to the semifinals. So there are 4 teams left in the playoffs. The Broncos and Seahawks are 2 of the 4 teams. It is predicted that each of these teams will beat their opponents in the semifinals and then play each other in the finals, which is the Super Bowl, and then the Denver Broncos will win. Okay, so that's a prediction for 3 outcomes of games here being made in one prediction, which is that the Denver Broncos will beat the Seattle Seahawks in this year's Super Bowl. As we can see here, this email was composed on January 19th. So this is before the championship games, the semifinals on the 25th. I think it's the 24th and 25th. Or maybe it's just the 25th, actually. Okay, so we can see here, January 19th. So the video also that you are watching on the social media platform you are watching it on, the post date proves this prediction is being made ahead of time. The purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is for a few main purposes. Number 1, it is to prove that God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is being explained on this channel. It is also for the purpose, this prediction that is from God, to prove that the righteous Christian God of the Bible is the true God, as opposed to any other type of God. There are many people today that think that this word God can apply to anything and all religions lead to the same destination, etc. It's not correct, and this prediction will prove this. And also, this prediction will prove the controversial things that I am saying in this video, including what I have just said. And I know far better than anyone, and you, the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. I know far better than you the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction. And it is to prove the things that I am saying. And there is no debate regarding the controversial things that I'll be explaining. Now, the agnostic atheist will say, well, there's 4 teams left. It was quite possible that the Broncos and Seahawks would meet each other in the Super Bowl and the Broncos would win. That's not that big of a deal of a prediction, and that would be correct. That's true. But the reasons for this prediction and how it is known, the reasons that I will be explaining in this video, and I may make 2 videos. I might divide this into a couple of videos. The reasons for how this is known ahead of time are the proof that this is from God. No human being is capable of concocting these reasons in their own imagination. No person is that creative, as you will see. And if you don't see this, I am sorry for you, but you are a fool. But you are a fool by choice. And I know why you don't. And I understand where you're coming from, and I know that choice. You do not want the righteous Christian God of the Bible to be the true God. And fair enough. That's the purpose of life, in fact, is to make that choice. This is the reason why we are created in God's image, which is why we have free will. And our free will is to make this choice as to whether or not we want the righteous Christian God of the Bible to be the true God or not. This is why God has partially hidden himself. But I am here to help you with this prediction. I'm here to help open your eyes to what you have been blinding yourself all of these years. And really, to be honest, there is no excuse for not knowing that the righteous Christian God of the Bible is the true God. In fact, everyone knows this. There's no such thing as an atheist. Everyone knows. And even, well, I'll give you an example. Near-death experiences actually confirm this. People come back and they say, well, I just knew. I didn't need someone to stand in front of me and list out the things and the evidences and the explanation for God and all that. The spirit of that person just knew. And they knew that they had rejected God, right? Especially someone who is from a Christian or formerly Christian nation. They know what it's all about. Anyway, we'll get into subjects like that. Well, let me just add this. Contrary to what evangelical Christians will say, or most of them I should say, there are 3 camps. There are 3 places where people will be at after they die, not 2. It's not binary, heaven or hell. And also the evangelicals are not correct when they say there will be people that will be tortured forever in hell. No, of course not. And the agnostic atheist is correct in using that as justification for not believing, because obviously that would not be a good God. It is also contrary to the Bible. The Bible does not talk about a torturing forever of people. It, in fact, talks about a quote-unquote second death. Anyway, so there will be people that will die the second death. That's one camp. The 2 remaining camps are those that will pass from life to life and not go to the other place, the uncomfortable place. And the uncomfortableness of that place is different for each individual, depending on what they did and how they responded to God, etc. Okay, and then so there are the middlings. So this is the vast majority of people. The people that, for example, were born before Christ, the people, and not necessarily, there will be some that were born before Christ that passed from life to life. But what I'm saying is that there will be people in that camp, also people in our time that didn't have an opportunity or a full opportunity to receive the gospel. For example, people in many nations that are barely Christian evangelized, just for example. But when it comes to the Westerner, someone who is, for example, from North America, and they still have rejected God, especially if they are over the age of 20, because today the gospel has, in the generation Y, Z, you would call it, they've barely received the gospel like people in other countries now, right? Anyway, you get my point. The one's judgment is commensurate with the amount of light and truth that that person was exposed to in their life. So be warned. if you are, for example, a baby boomer from the West, and you have rejected God and you are still an agnostic atheist, even though the evidence, including scientific evidence, because of course materialism is a far long ago outdated ideology. I mean, even early 20th century science disproved the 19th century idea of materialism. Anyway, if you have succumbed to that propaganda of materialism, well, you're being warned, and that's what this video is for. Let's get into these reasons, which you will clearly see are from God, and if you can't see that, I don't know what to say to you, but you will see. No one is creative enough. These explanations will be amazing, and no one is creative enough to have concocted this of their own self. All right, so more reasons for how this Super Bowl prediction is known ahead of time. And again, these reasons are the proof that this prediction is from God. Because, again, no one is creative enough to concoct these reasons in their imagination. It's not possible. You will clearly see that these reasons are from God. So, Kobe Durant, number 14 for the Rams, had 2 interceptions in the game against the Bears. This was the divisional round playoff game between the Rams and the Bears, bringing his total to 3 interceptions during the postseason, which gives us a 23, which gives us a hint at the Antichrist, who is from Chicago, where the Bears are from. The Antichrist who wore number 23 in high school basketball, which is also why Michael Jordan played for Chicago and wore number 23. The GOAT, greatest of all time, of basketball, hints at the GOAT Antichrist basketball president. Now, Kobe Durant hints at Kobe, who played for Los Angeles. Kobe Bryant wore number 8. Stidham wears number 8 and will win this year's Super Bowl, 8 years after the Philly special involving player number 88. Okay, so let's drill down here. What are we talking about here? We're talking about how it is that Stidham. So what's going on here is this article right here. This was a news story after this weekend's games, and the news story was about Nick Foles, of former quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, who led the Eagles to the Super Bowl victory in 2018. And he beat the Patriots in that game. Okay? Now, in the Broncos game, in the divisional round here, at the end of the game, their star quarterback, which my friend and I had previously recognized that God was communicating that this guy was extremely prophetic even before he got injured, okay? We already knew. His name, Bo Nix, the star quarterback for the Denver Broncos, okay? He got injured at the end of the game and is out for the season. Bad timing for the Broncos. Bad timing because they have to play the Patriots in the AFC Championship the following weekend, this Sunday. That's why Nick Foles chimed in with a kind of a joke, sarcasm, on Twitter, on X, when he said something about starting backup quarterbacks beating the Patriots in the playoffs. Because he, as a backup quarterback, because the same scenario happened with Nick Foles. Nick Foles was a backup quarterback after the Eagles' star quarterback got injured at the end of the season. I forget. It might have even been in the beginning of the playoffs that the star quarterback got injured. And then Nick Foles came in as the backup quarterback and still led their team to the Super Bowl victory. Okay, now that's very interesting because we'd already recognized that Bo Nix, the starting quarterback for the Broncos, is extremely important. And now we know why. Nix is his last name, which hints at Nick Foles, the starting quarterback that beat the Patriots in the playoffs after he became the backup. After him, the backup quarterback replaced the star quarterback. Well, same with this guy Stidham, okay? So this guy Stidham, Jarrett Stidham, is the backup quarterback now who will be starting the rest of the games for the Broncos. Now, what's interesting is that this game, this predicted Super Bowl, will be 8 years after Nick Foles beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. But that Super Bowl is known for the most famous trick play in Super Bowl history. Right before halftime, quarterback Nick Foles handed the ball to, I believe, a running back, who then tossed the ball to the wide receiver, number 88, who then threw the ball to the quarterback, number 9, Nick Foles, who caught the ball in the end zone and scored a touchdown right before halftime. It's called the Philly Special. Okay, it's very famous. These two players, Nick Foles, number 9, and the wide receiver that threw the ball to Nick Foles, number 88, for the Eagles, actually reunited later with the Bears. And that was a news story too, when they reunited, because of this famous Philly Special play. In other words, in their careers, they both ended up in Chicago after they played for the Eagles. Okay, so that's the backstory here to what's going on here, all right? Now, but the thing too is that Kobe Bryant, his helicopter was intercepted, if you will, just like this guy Kobe intercepted these games in this Rams game. Oh, you know what? More needs to be explained to elaborate what I'm talking about, but that's another video. The Rams-Bears game. Okay, never mind. It's very interesting because the LA hints at the two interceptions for the Rams hints at the two planes that were destined for Los Angeles, where the Rams play on 9/11, that rammed into the two towers. Well, anyway, okay. So anyway, Kobe Bryant wore number 8, but also Stidham wears number 8. And this Super Bowl will be 8 years after the Philly Special. But that's interesting because of the Philly Special involving player number 88, which God followed up on later in prophetic signs, because after the same scenario happened again the following season, and Nick Foles stepped in and won a playoff game the following year, but didn't win the Super Bowl. Nick Foles was then offered a $88 million contract to leave the Eagles and play with another team. And Nick Foles was selected number 88 in his draft. So Nick Foles, he was selected number 88 in his draft, was involved in the most famous trick play in history, in which he caught the ball thrown at him from player number 88, and then later signed the prophetic $88 million contract, which, by the way, that contract for the $88 million was exactly 8 years after player number 88 presented Barack Obama a jersey when his team visited the White House, the Chicago Blackhawks, on March 11, 2011, the day of the tsunami in Japan. That's another story, as the relevance to the tsunami connection regarding this. But anyway, yeah. That guy's name is Cain, as in Cain and Abel in the Bible. Judgment. He's number 88, 8 years exactly before the 88th selected in his draft signed the $88 million contract, who was involved in the trick play from player number 88. Okay, you get the idea here. It's a bunch of 88s. Oh, and also Nick Foles announced his retirement on the date 8/8, August 8th in 2024, and on and on. Okay, so we have the backup quarterback that Nick Foles is referring to here, who wears number 8, and he's predicted now to win the Super Bowl, and also prior to the Super Bowl beat the Patriots 8 years after Nick Foles beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. Okay. Now, the National Football Conference championship game with the Seattle Seahawks on January 25th will be exactly 313 weeks after Kobe Bryant's helicopter crash. Well, 313 is just this number that God uses because it hints at the Pope Francis, who was elected Pope on the date 313 in the year 13, and also Rome converted to Catholicism in the year 313 AD. So it's symbolism for Rome. The Seattle Seahawks play in King County, as in the Antichrist king, in the 42nd state. The Antichrist's period in Bible prophecy is symbolized by 42 months, mentioned 7 times. Okay, and the Seattle Seahawks play near the Space Needle, which is representative of the mark of the Antichrist, which is transhumanism technology, SHOTs, that people took. Okay, so that's why the Seattle Seahawks here, in context of the white horse, which again, is also where the Antichrist rides the white horse also in Bible prophecy. So we got two teams that are Antichrist. Also, Seahawks are birds, and the unclean birds are mentioned in Mystery Babylon in Revelation chapter 18, which is referring to Rome. And it's really quite astounding that the majority of Christians, quote unquote, well, whatever, but those that are even interested in prophecy don't understand that obviously Revelation 18 is talking about Rome. I mean, it's clear. And the unclean birds, of course, are the cardinals. Okay. In Rome, at the Vatican. Now, what's interesting here is that Kobe's rape case, if you recall, one of the highlights of Kobe's career was when he was charged with rape in Eagle, Colorado. Okay, Foles plays for the Eagles. Stidham plays for the Denver Broncos in Colorado. And we have this connection with the Kobe here. Okay. You know what? Kobe's helicopter crash involved 9 people, and the helicopter departed at 9 a.m., and Nick Foles wears number 9. Wow, that's another thing. Again, because the number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. It's from the Bible. It symbolizes God's judgment. So that's why Nick Foles. So the reason for Nick, this was the first man named Nick back in 2018 in his Super Bowl. This was when it was first recognized that God is using this play on the name Nick or other variations of Nick, like Nike, for example, to communicate the Nicolaitan doctrine that in the book of Revelation, Jesus said to the churches that he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of his doctrine. The number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. This was also back in the beginning days of when it was recognized that the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment and is the most important number. It's because of Nick Foles. Okay? Because of the Nicolaitan doctrine that Jesus is coming to make judgment on. And a primary purpose of the end times, or for the end times, and for the Antichrist, is to test the faith of the church. And also, of course, to compel others to come into the church. But it is all about the church. I mean, the purpose of God's creation is the church, right? So, Nick Foles. Nicolaitan doctrine, judgment for this doctrine. That's why he wears number 9. But he plays for Philadelphia because Philadelphia is one of the 7 churches in which Jesus wrote letters to and spoke about the Nicolaitan doctrine. Now, let's talk about the Nicolaitan doctrine for a second here. What is the Nicolaitan doctrine? Well, if you listen to the Nicolaitans, they'll tell you that, well, we can't really know. It's really kind of obscure. We don't really know precisely or what exactly Jesus was talking about. We'll just chalk it up to something like, bad Christians. Because we don't really know. And or also they'll say, well, it's those with the weird doctrine. Because Jesus also did mention doctrine in context of Nicolaitan. So it's not our church, of course, because we got the correct doctrine. It's those other churches that got some kind of weird doctrine going on. Those are the Nicolaitans. Well, the word Nicolaitan is a cognate from Greek that means ruling over the laity. The Nicolaitans are those that rule over the laity. Jesus forbid teachers. He forbid calling anyone your teacher. Sorry, but of course, the word pastor, quote unquote, or priest or reverend or bishop or pope, they're synonyms for teacher, obviously. And Jesus forbid this. Why did he forbid this? Well, he knew what would come. He knew that these Nicolaitans would teach these errors that would be passed down through the moneyed church. these errors would become institutionalized through the moneyed church that these quote-unquote pastors would get paid through. That's why Jesus also forbid preaching for money. And no, the passages that Paul uses or rather the passages that the Nicolaitans cite to support their preaching for money are not correct. They're twisted out of context. They're twisted and they're out of context. In other words, the preceding or the following verses are also not read. If anything, Paul was talking about preaching for preaching for food, or rather receiving food for a person's evangelism. But it's also clear that what Paul was talking about was not the type of preaching that preachers do today, where they're living in a stationary home and they're showing up at a building once a week to get paid. The alpha male of the group that steps up onto the stage for 45 minutes and talks and allows no one else to talk and has 100% monopoly on information inside that building, or not even inside that building, with anyone that goes to that building on a regular basis, like any socialist dictatorship. And that's exactly what they are. They're socialist dictators. And just like in socialism and in communism, socialism produces an immature citizenry in which the citizen or the person is dependent on the state. And likewise, those that often come to church are dependent on the spoon feeding from the church pastor, which is a watered down message because of the money involvement. Does not matter how big or small the church is either. These are the Nicolaitans. Jesus warned against the first warning that Jesus gave to the disciples when asked for the signs of his return. He said, beware of the Christs that will come that will lead many people astray. Jesus was not referring to people who would come claiming to be Lord Jesus Christ that would lead many people astray. First of all, there haven't been many people, I can't even think of one, that have come claiming to be Lord Jesus Christ, let alone them leading many people astray. Because anyone that does come claiming to be Lord Jesus Christ has been recognized throughout history as being mentally unwell. The word Christ is Greek, which means Messiah, which is Hebrew for anointed one. And there are many anointed ones or other anointed ones in the Bible other than Lord Jesus Christ. So when Jesus said, beware of the Christs that will come and lead many people astray, he meant beware of the anointed ones, the self-anointed ones that would lead many people astray. And now, currently, it is more dangerous than ever to be following a pastor, quote unquote. For example, John said in his writings, for you do not need a teacher, as you know. You have the Holy Spirit. And also we have the Bible now. And regarding their monopoly, Paul said, on information, Paul said, if someone has something to say while another one is speaking, let the person who is speaking be silent and let the person speak. When do you ever see that today? If someone were to stand up and say during the pastor's speaking, hey, I got something to say regarding that, what you just said there, that person would be immediately escorted outside of the church and probably asked never to return. And thus, through monopolizing information, cutting off the body of Christ, which is the purpose of meeting in an assembly. Not to listen to a lecture from one man, the alpha male of the group, and then pay him for his performance. And it truly often is a performance. Anyway, what is precisely the Nicolaitan doctrine? We now know who the Nicolaitans are, but what is the Nicolaitan doctrine? Well, the Nicolaitan doctrine is errors that have been passed down through the institutions of the moneyed church. The church is. Now, God has been identifying precisely the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day. And what I am about to say is not up for debate. That's the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction, and I know more than you the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction. Because this prediction will prove that this is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, and God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections overwhelmingly identifies what precisely is the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day. And I know God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. So I know what this is. And it is cheap grace, or free grace, or once saved, always saved, or eternal security, or our righteousness is as filthy rags. One verse that Luther took out of context to support his entire heretical doctrine. I'll get to that in a second. But the package that this free grace comes in is dispensationalism. And those who have already taken the mark of the Antichrist, the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians, is because it is judgment for this particular doctrine, who, when asked themselves or each other, is this the mark of the Antichrist? Well, no, it couldn't, because the rapture hasn't happened yet. That's exactly why you did take it. The idea that all quote-unquote Christians will be raptured. And there'll be this period in which all of a sudden works are relevant, but not prior to it. Well, let me say that the book of Revelation and these letters to the churches, which of course speak about works throughout the 7 letters and the importance of their works, they were written to the churches in Asia Minor long before the rapture. And they were for these churches in the what we call church age. They're not the letters to the churches are not only relevant to those after the rapture. This is the workaround solution, one of countless workaround solutions that evangelicals have to their heretical doctrine, their Nicolaitan doctrine. This close cousin, which is also Nicolaitan, equally Nicolaitan, is sovereign grace, or Reformed theology, which comes in a package of Calvinism. So Luther, by the way, wanted to remove the book of Revelation from the Bible because of this issue. And he wanted to remove other parts of the Bible, including the book of James, because of their contradictions to his and the modern evangelicals' doctrine. Luther was an Augustinian monk, and Calvin, the 2 leaders of the Reformation, titled his writings Systematic Augustinianism, only quoted Augustine and disparaged other church followers that came long before Augustine, centuries before, and, for example, knew one of the apostles or knew someone that did and spoke the original Greek. Because if you learn about the writings of the original church, or rather the early church fathers, they flatly contradict the modern doctrine, the Calvinist Lutheran doctrine. The Reformation was a revivification of Augustinianism. Augustine corrupted the Western church with his writings. His latter writings, not his earlier ones. Anyway, so that's the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day. All right? Which also, by the way, includes predestination. Okay, let's move on. Watch the 23 church signs video, like I said. So, back to this here. Nick Full's number 9 judgment. Okay, number 9 symbolizes judgment. Nick Nicolaitan was born 9 days after Reagan's farewell speech that quoted John Winthrop's Shining City on a Hill sermon on January 11th, 1989. So that's 1/11, 9 days after the birth of player number 9, Nick Foles. This is amazing because this shining city on a hill symbolizes America, as does President Reagan for that matter, and the values of America. And America is God's Gentile nation that was founded with the Puritans and John Winthrop. The spiritual founding of America. America is God's Gentile nation, his nation that was set apart from the rest of the world, the rest of the nations, to be his nation of Christian disciples that spread the gospel around the world in the 19th and 20th centuries. This was all part of the big capital P plan. And so that's why, so, and because this is America is God's nation, his Christian nation, that's why the use of Nick Foles here, because of the Nicolaitan doctrine that is the predominant doctrine of our day. And that's why, anyway, he was born number 9 days before the speech on the date 1/1 or 1/11, as in Revelation 9:11, but also 9/11, the big warning of judgment. And by the way, that warning of judgment pointed to John Winthrop, because Flight 11 departed Logan Airport, which is on Governor's Island, where John Winthrop lived. Flight 11 with a crew of 11 that flew into the Twin Towers. It looked like a giant 11 in the 11th state to join the Union. Okay, now, the 40th president's speech was exactly 40 weeks, which is a period of connection that God uses in his signs to symbolize the birth pains, because Jesus, when asked by the disciples for the signs to look for of his return, Jesus used the metaphor of birth pains and earthquakes, and 40 weeks is the average human gestation period. So exactly 40 weeks after the 40th president's prophetic speech here, his farewell speech, was the earthquake, the prophetic World Series earthquake in San Francisco, which I won't get into here. Reagan was the 40th president, hence the 40 weeks connection. The end of the 40th president's presidency was 40 weeks exactly to the World Series quake. Number 9 days after 1/11, I should say, hits at 9/11 and Revelation 9/11. Okay. Foals, Middle English, means the term foal appeared in Middle English. The term foal means fool, or a foolish person, or a jester, or a court clown, but also a sinner or a rascal. This is perfect. Nicolaitan sinner. What did the Nicolaitans do? Which is why Jesus is critical of their works, which is why, by the way, the Church of Laodicea is representative because the 7 churches represent the stages of church history, and the last one, the Church of Laodicea, represents the modern evangelical church, which follows, by the way, the Church of Philadelphia, which in other words contrasts with the Church of Philadelphia, the only church that Jesus mentioned would not go through the tribulation, in other words, be raptured. In other words, the Laodiceans won't be raptured. The church that thinks it is in need of nothing, as Jesus said, but does not realize that it is blind, pitiable, and naked, and Jesus wants to vomit them out of his mouth, and Jesus is knocking at the door. In other words, Jesus isn't inside that church. The Church of Laodicea, which is the modern evangelical church that Jesus isn't inside. Can you believe that? And anyway, what the church says, which is why they think they are in need of nothing because of their doctrine, is that if you think your salvation requires works, then you aren't saved, which is the trick, obviously, that Satan would do. Any false heresy, by the way, usually employs that lie from Satan. If you don't believe the correct thing, then you're going to go to hell. Well, the problem is that salvation is not dependent on believing the precise doctrine. If that were the case, heaven is going to, if one needs to be a Calvinist to enter heaven, then heaven is going to be filled with a bunch of white men. Right? Of course, that's beyond silly, and nothing to do with the Apostles' Creed, furthermore, for example. But of course, it's absurd to believe that one needs to believe intellectually the precise doctrine to be saved, and that's how one is saved. James furthermore said, you see, even demons believe. And then James made the point in chapter 2 that one's faith requires works, because Christianity is a doing, an actualization of one's faith, as demonstrated, as James pointed out, by Abraham and Rahab. You see, there are two parts to salvation. Abraham was deemed righteous for believing in God's promises, but the second part was when God asked Abraham to sacrifice his only son. And Abraham was following through, believing in God's promises and actualizing his faith when he was about to kill his only son, Isaac, when God sent his angel to Abraham and said through the angel, "Stop, do not harm the boy, for now I know that you fear me." You see, God didn't know ahead of time whether or not Abraham feared him, and furthermore, neither did Abraham. He needed to actualize his faith. If we are simply saved through believing the correct doctrine, why don't we just go to heaven as soon as we intellectually believe the correct doctrine, and then we're eternally saved, supposedly, according to the evangelical doctrine? It's wicked deception from Satan. And so anyway, they excuse their sins because the motto is, I'm just a sinner saved by grace. That's the wicked deception of the Nicolaitan doctrine, summed up. I'm just a sinner saved by grace. That's why Nick, as in Nicolaitan Foals, number 9, as in sinner. Now, this is perfect, this meaning for the name Foals, for Nicolaitan symbolism. But foals is also a horse. A foal is a type of horse, a young horse, which hints at the Broncos. So Nick Foles, at the beginning of this video, I talked about this article, this story about how after the Broncos lost their starting quarterback, having to go the rest of the playoffs with their backup quarterback, Nick Foles chimed in because he went through the same thing. But it's the Broncos that Foles is talking about, and Foles is a type of horse, like Broncos. Which is why I wrote right here, once I realized this, okay? Now Nick Foles will be 444 months and 4 plus fourth prime number of days old on the day of the Super Bowl. And the Antichrist who rides the white horse, it's all symbolism. Of course, there are two Antichrists, is the 44th president. Now, the Rams are playing the Seattle Seahawks on January 25th in the NFC Championship game, the semifinals. All right, so Foles will be 444 months and 4 plus fourth prime number of days old on the day of the Super Bowl. The Rams are playing the Seattle Seahawks. But that's amazing confirmation of everything, right? Because what we are predicting is that Foles is a type, a foreshadow of what's about to happen, which is the victory win of the backup quarterback in the Super Bowl, as was Foles, a backup quarterback in the playoffs when he won the Super Bowl. So that's why this is amazing here. Now, and of course, the Broncos are the white horse team, and that's Antichrist. Also, it'll be played in San Francisco, which hints at Pope Francis, the Antichrist. The first of the two Antichrists. The 44th president is the second Antichrist. The Rams are playing the Seattle Seahawks. Okay, now Kobe Durant, which hints at Kobe Bryant. And Kevin Durant. Okay, now Kobe played for Los Angeles and is named after Kobe, Japan, which is the sister city to Seattle. Kevin Durant was drafted by the Seattle Supersonics. Now, Foles, a type of horse, his last game was with the Colts. Yeah, he ended his career with the Colts. Indianapolis Colts. Of course, Colts is a type of horse. His name means horse. It's the same meaning, actually, because Foles is a young horse, as is the colt. Stidham, who plays for the Broncos, the horse team, which is why Foles is a type for Stidham, is from Kentucky, where the Kentucky Derby is held, the most famous horse race. Nick Foles, his last game as a Colt was the 4x4 super semi-prime number of weeks before January 18th, when the Broncos' Nicks, that's his last name, Stidham, a game. Okay, so Stidham replaced Nicks after his injury at the end of the game. Nicks, of course, is also a parallel with Nick Foles. But we have a connection here between the Knicks game and the Stidham entry into the scene game with this 4x4 super semi-prime number of weeks. This would be, which I believe is 141 weeks. This would seem to confirm January 20th, 2089, which was the birth date of Nick Foles, being 444 months plus 4 plus 4th prime number of days to the Super Bowl. A colt is a foal. Medina Spirit won the 2021 Kentucky Derby on May 8th, 2021. This is 57 months to February 8th, 2026, the date of the Super Bowl. It's exactly 57 months. Medina Spirit hints at Bill Gates, who lives in Medina, Washington, a part of the Seattle area. And Gates lives in Medina. He announced his divorce in Medina on the Monday following the Medina horse win at the Kentucky Derby. That was all part of the same prophetic sign in a way, because of the timing. Now, in Gates, of course, in the Bible, judgment on a people or a nation begins symbolically at the gates. Now, January 25th, the Rams-Seahawks game will be 17,760 days after Seattle Slew won the Belmont Stakes horse race, one of the 3 horse races part of the Triple Crown, on June 11th, 1977. That's quite something. Okay, so we're looking at the prophetic significance of this Rams-Seahawks game when it's predicted that the Seahawks will win. And this will be the number of days it symbolizes America, 1776, adding a 0 there. But also 1776 is 4 times 444. Again, the Antichrist American president is the 44th president. January 25th is 30 months and 14 days after the Major League Baseball All-Star Game in Seattle. So this game, that I think will be in Seattle, yeah. Okay, and that All-Star Game was in Seattle on July 11th, 2023. There's more to this. Let's get into it. The flooding was in the 14th state on that day. Now, Seattle is the evergreen, it's the evergreen state. The logo for the All-Star Game was green. It had in the logo the mountain, Mount Rainier. And on the same day was the flooding in Vermont, which is French for Green Mountain. It was on the same day as the All-Star game, which is the 14th state, Vermont. It was in the capital city of the state, which further confirms the significance of it being the 14th state. And in the game, the National League won with 3 runs. This gives us a 3-1-4, which confirms this connection here of 30 months and 14 days to this Seattle football game. But why 3-1-4? Well, that's because the Antichrist is described in Isaiah chapter 31:4. Well, the verse that symbolizes the chapter is 31:4, when the Lord comes down on Mount Zion like a roaring lion to defeat the Antichrist. The Antichrist's successor and predecessor is the 3rd pope to be inaugurated this century, Pope Leo XIV. Leo is a lion. Isaiah 31:4. Okay? And so the National League won with 3 runs, and that was significant because the win was the National League's first win in 9 National League games in 11 years, which was a 9/11 sign, which hinted at Revelation 9:11, King Apollyon, and the game was played in King County. That just came to me. Wow. Yes. We had a 9/11 here. Okay, so there was a year in which there was no All-Star game because of a strike. So 9 All-Star games, streak was broken, dating back 11 years, right? 9/11, which is the description of Revelation 9/11 is the description of King Apollyon rising from the bottomless pit. And this All-Star game was played in King County. And you could say that the lion that comes down on Mount Zion in Isaiah 31:4 is the King of Kings. Now, the Seahawks quarterback is Sam Darnold. Okay, he is 7 times 4 years old, which hints at America because of the symbolic birth date of America, July 4th. But he was the 3rd overall pick, and he wears number 14. He was the 3rd overall pick in his draft, and he wears number 14. That's a 3-1-4, which identifies the Antichrist, Pope Francis, who will succeed and preceded Pope Leo, the 3rd inaugurated, elected Pope this century, who is Pope Leo XIV. Okay, so also Washington State, where the Seahawks in Seattle play, is the 42nd state. And the number 42 is symbolic of the period of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. Okay, also, Seattle is where the Space Needle is. The Space Needle is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, which is transhumanism technology, hence the space in Space Needle. You know what I'm talking about. The thing that most people have already taken is the mark of the Antichrist in its current form. Okay? It's not a so-called precursor to the mark of the Antichrist. It is or was the mark of the Antichrist in its current form. It does not need an additional form of technology or false form of religious worship to go with it. For those who are wise, it did come with a false form of religious worship. And does not need a supposed new age of dispensation after supposedly all quote-unquote Christians will be raptured. In fact, one of the main reasons why the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist is in fact judgment for this particular doctrine, which Jesus says he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth and those that teach and have the works that are a product of this Nicolaitan doctrine, dispensationalism. I covered this earlier in this video. All right, make sure you watch the 23 church signs video. So that's why Seattle, Space Needle. Also, Elvis transformed the thing industry when he took the thing, the needle, before he went on to the Ed Sullivan Show, which radically changed the perception of these things to the baby boomer generation at the time, which changed history. That's why Elvis went to Seattle during the World's Fair to film the movie. It happened at the World's Fair because the Space Needle opened for the World's Fair. It was built for the World's Fair, which was back in 1965, I believe. Or, yeah. Okay, now, Benedict Arnold is said to have died on June 14th, 1801, at the age of 60, Super Bowl 60. The name Sam Darnold is interesting, as in Benedict Arnold. But the thing about Benedict Arnold is that he fell on his horse. His horse fell on him. Okay? And he's known for, well, he was the traitor. He was known for being the traitor for switching his allegiance to the British and compromising the Patriots. That's Obama. That's symbolism for Obama. Now, Benedict Arnold's horse was shot, as in mark of the Antichrist needle, during a battle, and it fell and pinned Arnold on the ground, crushing his leg that had already been previously injured. Okay? Anyway, Sam Darnold, the quarterback, likely hints at Sam Adams and Benedict Arnold. Benedict Arnold fell under his horse. Sam Darnold will fall against the Broncos, the horse team. The Colts lost to Seattle on December 14th, the day Rob Reiner reportedly died. This was a big. I made more than an hour long video on this subject. The signs that occurred that included this Seattle Colts game, and Reiner hinting at Mount Rainier and all of that. So now this game that's coming up, this semifinals game, the NFC Championship game on January 25th, that will be played in Washington State, the 42nd state, is 42 days after this prophetic game that I just mentioned involving the same team, the Seattle Seahawks, in Washington, the 42nd state. These two prophetic games, in other words, in the 42nd state, are 42 days apart. On December 14th, this game I'm talking about here, it was the game of the 44-year-old quarterback's comeback. So one of the big stories of this season was the injured Colts quarterback being replaced by the veteran Philip Rivers, who had retired 4 years ago, but came back to play with the Colts because of the coach for the Colts being his former coach, and Philip Rivers knowing extremely well the play design of the team, so he could just show up and fit right in because he understood the game plan. The Colts' offensive game plan he understood well. So he came back, he made a comeback after 4 years at the age of 44. Well, this hints at the comeback of the 44th president. And the 44th president, furthermore, is associated with horses in God's signs. For example, American Pharaoh, the Triple Crown winner, which I'm going to get to actually in a second. Okay, now this 44-year-old made a comeback with the Colts, as in the 44th president's predicted comeback. And it is 8 weeks, which is 4 plus 4 weeks. I forgot to include that there, to the Super Bowl, when it is predicted that the MVP will be a quarterback, player number 8. So 8 weeks to the Broncos quarterback. And the Broncos are, of course, a type of horse, like the Colts. So it's the 44-year-old's comeback, and it's 4 plus 4 weeks, but it's also 8 weeks to the predicted victory with quarterback number 8 for the Broncos. it may be that the Broncos make a comeback, a dramatic comeback in the game. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. Now, it was 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence. Sam Adams was one of them. December 14th last year, or this date, I should say, is the death date of George Washington, who was one of the signers. Benedict Arnold, who died on June 14th, 1801, is said to have died 18 months exactly after George Washington, which of course is 6 plus 6 plus 6 months. And the traitor is the American president Antichrist, Barack Obama. 2026 is 6 plus 6 plus 6 years since the first black president. His election, that is. So, and he's the traitor, the Antichrist president, first black president. Sam Darnold, the quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, battled an oblique injury, relying on painkillers to play, sparking concerns about his condition and playoff availability against the 49ers. Stidham means homestead. The name Stidham means homestead. Jarrett Stidham means super strong or brave with the spear. Sam Darnold represents a traitor. Horses on a homestead. So 56 passengers were on Flight 175. That flew, the second plane that flew into the second tower on 9/11. Does Flight 175 hint at 1776 somehow? Somehow I suspect this because, of course, there were 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. There was 56 passengers on Flight 175, which kind of is similar to 1776. So let's test this theory. What's going on here? Well, first of all, the December 14th, 2025 game in Washington State was 226 years exactly after George Washington died. H226 in the Hebrew concordance is the word that means in Hebrew prophetic sign. So the Washington State game connected to the death of Washington through this connection that means prophetic sign. Pope Francis died 63 years exactly after the Space Needle opened on April 21st, 1962. Prince Philip reportedly died at the age of 99 on the 9th of April, the 99th day of the year. The name Philip means lover of horses. Pope Francis reportedly died 99 years after Queen Elizabeth was born, the Pope Francis being the monarch of the Vatican. This date of the Super Bowl, February 8th, will be exactly 41 months after Queen Elizabeth reportedly died on June 8th, 2022. 41 is the equivalent in gematria of the word key. It is a key that opens the bottomless pit. A key is the symbol for the Vatican. And the Pope Francis, is entombed in the Vatican. And this Super Bowl will be played in San Francisco. February 17th is the year of the horse in Chinese astrology, the beginning of the year of the horse, which will just be 9 days after the Super Bowl in which the team that is a horse, the Broncos, are predicted to win. This year of the horse will begin 1776 days after Prince Philip reportedly died, and Philip means lover of horses. That's interesting because we have Philip Rivers. Wow. Yes, that's right. Philip Rivers is this comeback quarterback, right? For the Colts. And the day that he came back was in Seattle, playing for the Colts, was the day of the Green River overflowing, causing destruction in Seattle. So Philip Rivers, lover of horses, Rivers. Wow. Yeah, and then green also because it's the fourth color of the rainbow, 44-year-old comeback. And the fourth horse of the apocalypse is the green horse. Queen Elizabeth II had a lifelong passion for horses, owning many throughout her reign, from beloved ponies like Emma and Burmese to champion racehorses like Estimate, who won the historic Gold Cup in 2013, making her the first reigning monarch to do so. Her equestrian legacy also includes breeding top-class racehorses like Highclere and Dunfermline, and maintaining herds of native breeds like Fell and Highland ponies. April 9th, 2021, the day that Prince Philip died at 99, as in Revelation 9:11, because 99 is 9 times 11, King Apollyon, Prince Philip, lover of horses, was the day of the eruption of the volcano on St. Vincent that left ash all over Kingston, the city. And the ash traveled 110 miles to Barbados. God pairs 9 and 110 together. That's another story, though, to confirm the signs and connections. And that day is 4 times the 40th semi-prime number of days before September 8th. And the death of the Queen, who was a lover of horses, the 6th super prime months, which in turn is the 6th super prime number of months, 41 months, to Super Bowl 60. Exactly. Obama's acceptance speech at the Democratic National Convention in Denver's Mile High Stadium under a white horse in the 8th month of the year 08 is 9 plus 100 plus 100 months and 11 days. In other words, 911, 9/11, before the Broncos' predicted win in the Super Bowl with the backup quarterback number 8. 8 years after the backup quarterback, who was 88th selected in his draft, won the Super Bowl. And it'll be played in San Francisco, and Pope Francis died at the age of 88. So, again, we have Obama's acceptance speech in the 8th month of the year 08, connecting with Revelation 9:11 symbolism to the predicted win of quarterback number 8. The white horse team, the Antichrist rides the white horse in the book of Revelation, and the Antichrist will be the representative of King Apollyon, Satan, who is mentioned in Revelation 9:11. Seattle Slew, this horse, won the Belmont Stakes race on June 11th, 1977. Exactly, well, not exactly, but basically exactly. 4 plus 4 plus 4 months before Affirmed won the Triple Crown at the Belmont in 1978. The next year, in other words. There was not another Triple Crown winner for 444 months until 2015 when American Pharoah won the Triple Crown at the Belmont and became the 4 plus 4th plus 4th Triple Crown winner in history. That's amazing. So between Seattle slew, 4 plus 4 plus 4 months, then another to the affirmed Triple Crown win, and then another 444 months to the next Triple Crown winner, American Pharoah, who was the 4 plus 4 plus 4th Triple Crown winner in history. You get the idea here. The 44th president, the American Pharoah, because the name of the horse that won the Triple Crown in 2015 is American Pharoah. American Pharoah, and a Pharaoh in the Bible is a type for the Antichrist. American Pharoah won the Triple Crown 7 years, as in Daniel chapter 9, and the 7-year period that symbolizes the Antichrist's period, before Justified won the Triple Crown on June 9th, 2018. Pharaoh in the Bible pursued the Israelites after 400 years of affliction in Egypt. Justified won the Triple Crown exactly 400 weeks before it is predicted that the Broncos will win the Super Bowl. So, and it'll be won against Seattle, the big thing that I forgot to add at the end of this sentence. So Seattle slew, as you can see here, connects to the affirmed Triple Crown win, 444 months before the American Pharoah Triple Crown win, 7 years exactly to the justified Triple Crown win. There's prophetic significance in the name justified, of course. We are justified. Our faith is justified with faith in Jesus. Okay, and then the justified Triple Crown win connects with 400 weeks exactly, and that's relevant because of the 400 years of affliction in Egypt, and justified connects with the American Pharoah win. And that gets us to the Broncos win, predicted win, the horse team over Seattle. The beginning of this connection here. This paragraph is truly profound. Foals, a type of horse, number 9, won the Super Bowl 90 days before Justified won the 144th Kentucky Derby, with the broadcast beginning at 2:30 p.m. Okay, that's a pairing of 9 and 23, first of all, which is what God does to pair, to confirm the signs and connections, as I explained earlier, because the Antichrist was inaugurated in 2009 and wore number 23 in high school basketball. 23 is also the 9th prime number. 144 because this is a prophetic number in the book of Revelation, a very important number regarding those who will be raptured, and that's why this connects with justified, because this also hints at the rapture. Now, Foles number 9 won the Super Bowl 9 plus 9 weeks exactly before Justified won the Triple Crown. And that's also 6 plus 6 plus 6 weeks. But this gives us a 999 and flipped upside down a 666 also. Just more confirmation of the relevance between these horses and Nick Foles and the Colts quarterback and the Broncos. Because number 9 won the Super Bowl 90 days before Justified won the Kentucky Derby at 2:30 p.m. Pairing of 9 and 23. Seattle slew hints at the Broncos slaying the Seattle Seahawks in the Super Bowl. Slew is the past tense for to slay, as in slaughter. It also hints at the slain in the coming Cascadia earthquake, as well as the coming eruption of Yellowstone volcano, to which the closest city is major city is Denver, Colorado, where the Broncos play. So the Broncos win over Seattle. This game between the Broncos and Seattle will also point to the coming earthquake, the Cascadia earthquake, and the eruption of Yellowstone, which I believe is quite likely to occur at the same time and to be triggered by an asteroid. on December 26th, 2030. Seattle Slew won the Belmont on June 11th, 1977. Let's see, we already did this paragraph, but so I did add what I wanted to add at the end here, which is that they will slay Seattle to win the Super Bowl. Okay, so same paragraph as before, but just that, Seattle Slew connects to the slaying of Seattle. Okay? Foals, a type of horse. Number 9, we already did this line as well. Okay. Let's see. If the Broncos win the Super Bowl, it will be 10 years after they last won the Super Bowl, when player number 18 was the quarterback. Number 18 plus 10 years hints at 181, which is the 42nd prime number. And again, the number 42 symbolizes the Antichrist in Bible prophecy, the period of the Antichrist. And 181 is equal to Barack Obama in Hebrew gematria. The letter X symbolizes a mark of the Antichrist. X is also the Roman numeral for the number 10. So we got a 10-year difference between these two Super Bowls. This one against Seattle and everything that I've explained will point to the mark of the Antichrist because, again, Seattle comes from the city next to the Space Needle in the 42nd state, all right, in King County. You get the idea. Okay, now, this quarterback for the Broncos 10 years ago, the famous Peyton Manning, he wore number 6+6+6. And before each play, for whatever reason, he shouted Omaha. He's known for shouting Omaha before each play. This was all along throughout the many years of his career, hinting at Obama. Okay, and he won the Super Bowl 10, as in mark of the Antichrist, because of the Roman numeral 10 being an X, and X being a symbol for the mark in God's signs. Because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist in the book of Ezekiel would have been a Tav mark, and in ancient Hebrew, the Tav was an X. Okay, so the 10 years difference before this year's predicted Super Bowl win by the Broncos, in the Super Bowl again, against the team that plays near the Space Needle in King County in the 42nd state, like I just said. Okay. Now, again, back to this. We already did this, so we're not going to do it again. Okay, let's see what else. Well, that's it. So, that's all for this video. I'll make some more videos. I'm going to repost the videos that I made that predicted the 49ers would win this Super Bowl because the information is still 100% correct. It's just that I misinterpreted what God was communicating. The Super Bowl will be played in San Francisco, which is what the San Francisco 49ers hint at. All right. The one thing that I was wrong about is that the San Francisco 49ers would become the third team in history to win the Super Bowl in their home stadium, giving us a 3 6s, 666. Okay, that's one thing that I was wrong about. Also, I was wrong about the 49ers playing in the third Super Bowl in 6 years. In their third Super Bowl in 6 years. But besides that, the amazing things need to be reposted because it's all 100% correct. And so this will all be proven to be true, and I have the authority to say this when this prediction comes to pass, okay? So I'm going to repost those videos also. God bless. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.